تحته فوق الصليب ويرقب رجوعي له من بعيد ودمه كنبعي شفاء وحبا حياة وبر لمن يريد فكيف أظنه لا يستجيب فيما أظنه لا يستجيب يرتب أمرا عجيبا يحل قيودي ويطفي اللهيب بيدي فيصنع قريب فيوجل قلبي بحب العجيب وحين يطول الليل الرهيب يهدي أمامي الطريق ويفتح أمامي بابا جديد فكيف أظنه لا يستجيب يطمئن خوفي ينير السبيل له سلطان على المستقيم يكفف دمعي ويرفع حملي على كتفيه بطول المسير نظرت إليه بعين العبيد فمال إليه كأب راحي يهرع لعوني ويدعوني ابنا بين البنين فكيف أظنه لا يستجيب كيف أظنه لا يستجيب فيما أظنه لا يستجيب يرتب يحل قيودي ويطفي اللهيب بيدي فيصنع يظل أمينا وديعا قريب فيوجل قلبي بحب العدل وحين يطول الليل الرهيب ويفتح أمامي بابا جديد أظنه لا يستجيب فكيف أظنه لا يستجيب. أكتر من سؤال على التجارب وقسوتها أحيانا. كل واحد متجرب يبقى حاسس حمله أتقل حمل، لكن يجوز لما يركز مع الناس بيشوف في ناس حملها أتقل، في ناس تجاربها أصعب من تجاربنا. أذكر مرة جات لي ست طيبة من المنيا ومن أمهاتنا الغلابة اللي هم بسطة ما بتقراش. قالت لي يا ابونا أنا بحب ربنا قوي، هو خد 3 من ولادي الشباب فاضل لي واحد، ممكن تقول له أروح أنا السما الأول قبليه؟ قلت لها أنت مش زعلانة؟ قالت لي لا، حد يزعل من ربنا؟ دول ولاده خدهم السما. فحسيت إنه ساعات بنتدلع، يعني إحنا تجاربنا بالنسبة لتجارب ناس تانية ممكن تبقى فيها دلع شوية. ومع هذا الواحد في التجربة محتاج يقرب من ربنا. في الأول ساعات يرفض كده ويعترض ويتغاظ ويبرطم، لكن هو مش هيرتاح غير لما يرجع لربنا.
When you come close to Him, two things happen, something internal and something external. Internally, you have peace, even if the circumstances don't improve. You have peace of mind and reliance on Him, no matter the storm that's going outside. And that's the result of prayer. That's the internal effect. Externally, you may start to see that this tribulation is really not as bad as you thought, and that God's intentions are good, and that it can result in the repentance of others, and it can result in many blessings. And so prayer resolves you internally and changes circumstances externally. Which one comes first is up to God. Sometimes it can be internal then external change, and sometimes it could be vice versa. Also, when you pray with fire during the time of tribulation, sometimes it can reveal to you that you yourself are a reason for the tribulation. Incorrect decisions, incorrect approaches, and sometimes you realize that God is causing me to go through this trial or tribulation, when in reality maybe I was the reason that led to this situation. With prayer, your eyes will be opened, and you'll see that maybe you had a role to play, and that God is not to blame. And this brings joy to God's heart, that we don't complain to Him or complain to Him about what He's done. We complain about ourselves to Him. We confess to Him that we've done things ignorantly, like we talked about yesterday. God's intentions are good. He doesn't want His kids to suffer, but He wants them with them in heaven. So if suffering here is part of the journey to heaven, then He will allow them to suffer. Not because He wants us to, but because He wants us ultimately to be with Him eternally. So if the path requires some suffering, then He'll allow it. Like we say in the psalm, we went through fire and water, and you brought us to the place of rest. So there is fire and there is water, a type of burning and a type of drowning in a sense, but at the end we reach the place of rest. Another question, how can we discern the voice of God in the midst of solving issues? Spend a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time in reading the Father of Confession, a lot of time in meditation. All of that will allow you to hear His voice properly. Another question, how can I fill the empty time at home aside from movies and shows? Today, Christian media is pretty active. We have channels to keep you busy, both Arabic and English. We also have recordings on Google of sermons by His Holiness and some of our other church fathers. We have many spiritual books, so there's a plethora of things that you can do, and you don't really have an excuse. If you want to spend your time wisely, you'll find opportunities to do so. As much as you can, try to charge your mind with spiritual things, because if you spend your time in front of these TV shows, it's going to feed your brain, you're going to dream about them, and so your whole mind will be these shows. You're going to zone out during prayer, you'll start thinking about the next episode, and you'll see a negative effect ultimately. Another question, sometimes I feel like I'm unable to stand in liturgy. It's okay, sit a little bit and pray in your heart, but as best as you can, stand back up. There's a reward in suffering, but everything in balance. If you're unable, take a break, take a seat, and then get back up when you can. Another question, I feel like God's going to punish me and take away blessings from me. Don't think about God in that way. It's okay to fear God, to not sin, but not to the point of living in fear. God is very kind and compassionate, much more than we are. He wants us to repent, and heaven rejoices with the sinner who repents. Another question, how can you not be prideful? From being humble. The two things are mutually exclusive. The humble person doesn't have pride in the fact that he's humble. He doesn't even notice that he's humble. For example, St. Mary, if you told her that she's humble, she probably would tell you it's probably not true, or she probably wouldn't notice. She doesn't think about herself in that manner. She's not thinking about it, that she has a virtue. Internally, she has a feeling that she's last amongst all, and she sees herself as a servant to all. So the humble person doesn't describe themselves as humble. He or she sees himself as lacking a lot and is fighting against pride. Another question about things that are lingering in your mind or recurrent thoughts that you're unable to get rid of. And so sometimes you may need external help or support to fight against these thoughts, if it's becoming to the point that it's pathological. But on another point, you can, if it's at a lesser level, you can fight against those thoughts that keep recurring in your minds. Another question, should you withhold yourself from taking communion? It's a little dangerous for you to make that decision. I prefer for you to take communion, and in very few cases, the Father of Confession may say, take a week, don't take communion right now because of this or that, because you're not repentant. But to do it in and of yourself is a little dangerous. Sometimes a person can say, you know what, I won't take communion for 2 or 3 months, and in that time they end up getting farther from God and committing more sins, so it ends up being a lose-lose situation. But if you attend a liturgy and you're upset with your brother and you realize halfway through liturgy, then maybe this is not the day to take communion, but make sure that you go and speak with your brother and resolve it so that the week after you can take communion. Just make sure you're doing all things in guidance with your spiritual father. Question about miscarriage and or abortion. Church teaches us that the child is a gift from God and is a life. So we don't mess with things like abortion. We allow God's will to go. I remember a situation in which a couple in one of the countries had an ultrasound that showed that the child is going to be very sick and very ill. They went back to their spiritual father and he said, allow God to make the decision. They continued the pregnancy and the child came out was 100% healthy and well. And the doctors were recommending abortion at the time. But according to their faith, they obeyed their spiritual father and the child came out healthy and well. You don't know if this was a miracle or if their diagnosis was incorrect, but in all situations, if you treat it as life, you realize you don't have the right to make the decision. We don't see a sick child and euthanize them because they're ill. This is an ill child in the mother's stomach. If God wants to give him life, he'll give him life, and if he doesn't, then he'll take him. The majority of children who have different levels of illness become a source of blessing for the people around them, and they are like angels. They are much more pure than we ever will be. Another question. Kids are now much more hyperactive and difficult to control. Every time I yell at them, my wife tells me it's not correct to do so. You may have a problem with your wife. You need to be in agreement on how you're going to raise your kids. Because if the father's too gentle and the woman's yelling, then it's not correct. Or if she's too gentle and he's always yelling, that's also not correct. You need to strike a balance and both have an understanding of how you'll approach. Sometimes he'll be a little strict and sometimes she'll be a little more strict. In some instances he'll be more gentle, in other instances she'll be more gentle. There shouldn't be extremes where one is one direction and the other is another direction. Both should share in both aspects. Because kids can take advantage of these situations and it can cause confusion. So you need to be in agreement with your wife to know that being too strict or too gentle is not correct. A balance in all things is good. There is a time to be strict and there is a time to be encouraging. Another question. I have mental and personal issues. It makes me feel like I can't believe the miracles. I want to separate from what personal issues and mental issues are from not believing in miracles. Those are two separate things. Some people spend a lot of time speaking about miracles and it becomes a little exaggerated. And some people manipulate others with miracles and I saw this and I saw that. Our people are easily confused by some of these stories, but at the end of the day, we have our Bible and our church and our spiritual fathers to guide us. We don't care about miracles or someone telling us that St. Mary appeared to me and told me this or St. George told me that. These can be things that fool or confuse others. So not everybody who comes and tells you, I saw a vision about you, about this or that you should believe it. If God wants to send us a message, He's going to send us a message. He doesn't need a third party to tell us they saw a vision about us. The market is filled with people who have a lot of stories they want to share and confuse others. Some other people who have some mental or social issues can sometimes imagine that they see something and they don't mean to fool others, but sometimes they can have their own delusions that confuse them. And sometimes these delusions can take an appearance of a spiritual thing, but it may not be correct. Everything in balance and then understanding is good. All our church fathers told us that the stories of miracles that become exaggerated are not really helpful in the church, because they've caused two problems. The first, people stopped reading the story of who Pope Carlos is. Rather, they read about his miracles. They don't read about his humility, his righteousness, his prayer life. And his life is a school. Instead, they're more interested in the miracles. And so they didn't benefit spiritually, because the spiritual benefit is his life and how he operated, not really his miracles. So we've left the stories and we focused on the miracles, and that has had a negative effect on us. The other problem is that because of reading miracles too much, we imagine that miracles are the norm, and so when they don't happen, we start to be confused. We say, why am I the only one not experiencing the miracle? Miracles have never been the norm. They've always been the exception. So the stories of miracles that become so common is not the thing that we should be spending our time reading. If you want to read spiritual books or the lives of the saints. If someone allows for a miracle, if God allows for a miracle for someone, then so be it. But it's not the norm, it's the exception. For example, for Elijah, he had multiple widows during his time, but he was sent to one specific widow and lived in miracle with her and gave her the oil. Why that one specific widow and not others? That's up to God's wisdom. The widow that Elijah was sent to was unexpected to. I mean, she wasn't even a Jew in a sense. So God wants to tell us that miracles, again, are the exception, and it takes the wisdom of God to decide for which situation and when to do it. We can't generalize the miracle as the norm. Why did Stephen not have a miracle and the stones were deflected from him and back to the people? He died. He ended up dying from stoning. He himself was doing miracles. Jacob of Zebedee died by Herod very quickly after Christ's death. Why didn't he have a miracle? He was one of the 12. St. Paul the Apostle one time was stoned and they almost thought he was dead. Why did God allow for him to be stoned? Why was the boat why did the boat have destruction while he was on it? Why did God allow for that boat to be destroyed, causing to the point of him almost drowning? It's up to God's wisdom. Even the big saints didn't have a lot of miracles in their lives, even if they were giving miracles to others. There is a time for miracles and there is a time for suffering and pain. Suffering and pain usually is a lot more frequent than miracles. I'm going to show you some more videos of some of the missions that we're doing. We have Abuna Mark with us who served in Africa, and Tony, who's traveling next month to go all over Africa. If you want to organize some of these trips, please let us know. We started a new technical school in Burundi, and it's the first one in the whole country. And the president of Burundi sent a letter to His Holiness thanking him.
Innovative education and to rally around them, to lead them as far as their dreams, talents and resilience take them. Our mission: train young people with a creative and active spirit, a spirit of understanding and compassion for others, and the courage to act according to their convictions. We emphasize the development of each student spiritually, morally, intellectually, socially, emotionally, and physically. We believe that education is the key to shape the future and provide hope. The need for technology is increasing in underdeveloped African countries. Technical education is the backbone for that development. Here in Ruwigi, a province of Burundi in Central Africa, about 160 kilometers from Bujumbura, the capital, St. Mary's School is established as the first technical educational institute in the region. It is accommodating 300 students annually at the secondary level to be qualified for a university degree and for social society services. The school is based on 3 departments: computer maintenance, telecommunication and computer management. In 2021, St. Mary's School received the first batch, which consisted of 144 students. Boys and girls with the presence of a computer lab where each 2 students share 1 computer during each lab class. St. Mary's School provides health coverage to students, where there is continuous development of student skills on a psychological level. St. Mary's School provides students transportation. Students are even helped with school assignments after the school days. St. Mary's School teachers are well qualified. They are trained before school work, while we are continuing to provide them with different courses on a personal and professional level. St. Mary's School is supporting the civil society in Ruwigi by providing work opportunities for local citizens, students, and provide hope to the future of Burundi.
الانجليش بتاعهم مختلف شوية. طيب عشان وقتنا أحبائي، عندي سؤال ليكم كده تشاركوني قبل ما ابتدي المحاضرة.
I had a question for you before we start our lecture that I wanted to discuss.
لو سألتكم أشهر أنواع الصراعات بين الخدام في الكنيسة.
What are the most popular issues that arise between servants in church? What would you say?
يعني جوه الخدمة،
meaning within service
الكنيسة
itself, within the church,
ساعات يحصل
sometimes contentions
صراع،
arise and conflicts arise.
إيه أساسه؟ إيه
What do you
مشكلته؟
think is the root of those conflicts?
مش معقول ما عندكوش إجابات، يعني مش معقول. ها؟ يعني إيه شكل الصراع أو سببه؟ اللي عاوز يقول شكله أو سببه. ساعات يبقى اختلاف وجهات النظر وكل واحد متشبث برأيه. ناخد العيال برا الكنيسة النهاردة ولا نعمل لهم فصل جوه الكنيسة وتقلب خناق. ها تفضلي. جلسي ممكن يبقى في غيرة، خادم بيغير من خادم انه او خادمة غالبا يعني. طب ايه كمان؟ تفضلي. ان في واحد شايف نفسه صح على طول
another person said
وشايف
that
نفسه
one person
بيفهم،
thinks that they know
وسوري
it better than
الخدام دول
all,
مش فاهمين،
and the rest don't really
فالبصة
understand
دي
or know.
بتخليه
So
مرهق
this
في التعامل.
prideful look
ها
makes it difficult to
دنيا
deal with
اكتر
them.
يعني. طبعا ان يكون في نقص في الصداقة
Sometimes there is a
والعشرة،
lack of friendship
فبيبقى في تعامل
or
كده ايه
camaraderie, and so there's very cold
رسمي
relationships,
زيادة او حرفي
which leads
زيادة.
to issues.
غادة ان بعض الخدام يبقى خادم جديد عاوز يطور
Sometimes
ويعمل
a new
افكار
servant may
جديدة،
come and
وخادم
wants to
قديم
change ideas, and there's an older servant who doesn't want any changes,
ويعتبر اي
and
فكرة
there's a
جديدة بدعة
clash
يعني.
between the two schools of thought.
اتفضل. عدم المحبة ببساطة، في
Another
واحد
cause may be
بيتكلم
the
على
lack of
أخوه من
love.
ظهره،
One person speaking
دي
bad about the
سيئة
other
جدا يعني.
behind the
يبقوا
other's back.
خدام في نفس
Imagine
الكنيسة
two servants
ويتكلموا
within the
على
same
بعض.
church speaking badly
ايه
about each
تاني
other.
أنواع الصراعات أو المشاكل بين
What
الخدام؟
else are sources of conflict?
برافو عليك. إحساس خادم إنه عاوز
Sometimes one
يترقى،
servant can feel like they
إنه
want to
يبقى
be
أمين خدمة
promoted
أو
in a sense,
يتنقل من
to be a head
خدمة
servant,
ابتدائي
to go from
لإعدادي مثلا،
elementary to middle
فيبقى حاسس
school,
بالترقية،
and
ولو واحد
feels
ما
that they're better
ترقاش
than
كالوا عليه
someone who
الترقية
stays
ويبقى
in a certain stage.
زعلان ومتغاظ، ودي أفكار كلها
And these are
غريبة
all
جدا
crazy
يعني.
thoughts to
ها
have, of course, when
إيه
it comes
تاني
to service.
صراعات داخل الخدمة؟ برافو. أحيانا واحد يبقى دايما عنده إحساس
Sometimes you
إن
can have a
الناس
servant who
رافضاه
has an
أو
inferiority
بتتكلم
complex
عليه
and always feels
أو
like people are
مش
talking about
بتحبه
him or her or
لأنه عنده
dislike him or
صغر
her.
نفس، فبيبقى مرهق في
So this
التعامل.
person is
اتفضل.
exhausting to deal with as well.
برافو عليك. أحيانا الخادم يبقى قاري
Sometimes a
كتير
servant
وعارف كتير،
may
عاوز
be
ياكل أي
very well
قعدة،
read
كل ما
and
يقعدوا
wants to overtake
استنوا
any
بقى أقول لكم.
conversation and to share his experience and knowledge. You know, this person can be difficult to deal with and overrides any conversation. Sometimes there can be two good servants, but one person can be a little slower in their operations and someone can be faster in their operation. This can even be between spouses, and that can cause contentions and issues. Sometimes the servant can sometimes be a micromanager and want to go into every step, and another can be more of a big picture type of person who wants to focus on the directions that we're heading in. Sometimes we feel possessive of our service and say, this is my service. Or they don't share the secrets of the service with someone. Or they don't pass off knowledge or hand off from the service. They don't want to share their experience. Of course, if this happens at work, it would be disastrous, but we would never dare. Sometimes servants can be from different backgrounds. One person's coming from a church in Egypt where service is in one way, and another person was raised in the US and approaches service in a different manner. Sometimes it can be because one servant is very well loved and very active, and so from jealousy the other servants can try to take that person down. One servant likes to be showing off and be showy, and the other person gets bothered by that. One servant can feel like no one can duplicate what he does and that he's indispensable. Obviously, this is a source of pride, or that his service is the most important. And so they put down other services because they feel like theirs is the most important one. Sometimes difference in generations can cause issues in how they approach the service. One generation is afraid of change, another is supportive of change. For some people, services is just about logistics or activities. There's no feeling of the presence of God or the spiritual component. And so all they want to talk about is how to keep the service running efficiently, and it is no longer a spiritual thing. Focus on prayer and love. Again, some people feel like service can't operate without them and that they are indispensable. Also, favoritism is a problem. One person taking a few kids aside and being his or her favorites, and then starts making separations within the group. Sometimes there's a struggle for leadership. And take responsibility that no one else can touch. Of course, this is a worldly approach to it and is not spiritual at all. Sometimes we say that we are worried about the service as a cover for the fact that we have underlying pride, meaning nobody else can do it except for me. Another way of labeling myself as indispensable by labeling it that I'm worried about the service. Sometimes we feel possessive of the kids that we're serving, as if only we are responsible for them. It has a notion of possessiveness. They're God's kids, anybody can serve them. You're not responsible for them. Sometimes being overly energetic can be problematic to your co-servants, because someone may want things to be planned or organized, but another person who's always rushing and wants to go to the next step, they can clash in their approaches. The lazy servant also becomes a burden to others because his job isn't being done, and it ends up being the responsibility of somebody else. Because at the end of the day, it's a team effort, and if someone's not doing their job, it could be problematic. Again, taking sides and favoritism is a problem. You know, St. Paul in Corinthians gets very upset when people say that I am of Paul and I'm of Apollos. This always leads to contentions, and they start to fight against each other. At the end of the day, the goal is one. Sometimes a servant can be two-faced. In church is one thing, and outside church is another thing. It can be a burden for the service and can cause it a lot of issues because the true colors end up showing in certain situations. A servant can be a one-man show and doesn't want to involve the rest of the team. So let me speak a little bit about this issue. I called it the conflict of the eye and the hand. We are speaking about the oneness, and the beauty of the service is when all the servants are one hand with the priests. Sometimes the priests are in one area, the youth are in another area, the servants are in one area, and so there's 4 different methods or modes of operation. This is not what God intended. The Bible taught us that the church is one body and all the members operate together. So let's read what the Bible says and apply it and see the fight that happens between two members of one body. Because if this were a disease, it would be very problematic. This is what happens with the autoimmune diseases when the immune system of the body fights against the natural components of the body. Your body's immune system looks at its own members as foreign, and so it fights against itself and leads to diseases. This is a difficult illness, and so what they have to do is to shut down the immune system in a sense. So you're not facing external illness or external factors. And unfortunately, these diseases are increasing because stress is one of the biggest factors that triggers autoimmune diseases. Let's read this passage. It says, "For as the body is one," 1 Corinthians 12. It says, "For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made to drink into one Spirit. For in fact, again, just notice how many times the word one is mentioned. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. The foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body. Is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body. Is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. This is why I called it the eye versus the hand. Back to the passage. No, much rather, those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on those we bestow greater honor, and our unpresentable parts have greater modesty, but our presentable parts have no need. But God composed the body, having given greater honor to that part which lacks it, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Or if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. 1 Corinthians 12:12-26. One of the things that highlights human foolishness is that conflict between animals of the same species is pretty rare. You'll notice that each group of animals protect each other against other types of animals. They may have conflict with other animals, but often lions don't eat each other, but they can eat other animals. Humans are one of the only species that fights and struggles within itself more than it fights against other species. For example, ants walk in one line. You never see two ants fighting against each other. I'll give you $1,000 if you can show me a picture of two ants fighting. You would never see that. Because ants are cooperative, and no one is trying to be the queen or the boss. The results of these fights, hostility, wars, dispute, divisions, we see that the world has enough resources for every single person on earth. and it's sufficient for us more than once, meaning every single person can eat well, is treated well, have enough water, and there would be sufficiency. But because of wars and human selfishness and the constant economic disputes and the rich countries leaving the rest of the country poor, all of that results in humans fighting and struggling against each other. The 8 billion people are fighting against each other, hurting each other. If we were all one hand, the world and life would be pretty simple. Everyone would be able to live well. Thus, we have an issue as human beings. St. James says that. He says, "Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasures that war in your members?" You don't think that the enmity between you and another person is from that person alone. You are also guilty. You shouldn't allow for conflict or wars to happen. You're both humans at the end of the day. Why would you harm one another? The verse continues, "You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures." St. Paul asks us a question and he says, "The eye can't say to the hand, I have no need of you." This is said inside of our churches, unfortunately. One servant tells another, "Find another service, I don't need you." This is like the fight between the eye and the hand. Is it possible for the eye to say that to the hand? Of course not. Because if the hand gets dust inside of it, the hand is necessary to clean it up. It's natural that you need your brother. But it happens sometimes that one servant will say to another, "I don't need you." Sometimes it could be because the eye sees itself only and thinks it's the only important member. Sometimes a servant doesn't see the whole church, doesn't see the humanity of the people, doesn't see Christ, doesn't see the salvation of people. He sees himself only. That's what leads to issues. That's the person who says, "We don't need the youth to serve." And if they don't like the church, then they can leave. You don't understand that Christ came for them and died for them. Are you removing them from church and sitting there thinking that you're doing the right thing? Or alternatively, the eye can sometimes forget or neglect its belonging to the body. This person separates himself from the group, thinking he or she is more important, and he doesn't feel loyal to the rest of the body or belonging to the rest of the body. Or sometimes the eye can despise or ignore the role of the other organs, or to feel like they're not as valuable. Our church tells the priest that he can't pray a liturgy without a deacon. Our Orthodox church says we can't do it. The priest can say, "I am the priest, I can do the liturgy whenever I want," but of course he can't. Without a deacon and congregation, you can't. And the congregation can't do a liturgy without a deacon and a priest. We all need each other. There's interdependence. That's the understanding of the one body in Christ. Pride is really the god of wars. The wars within the church, within the homes. Pride is the source of all these issues. The majority of our issues at home and in churches and in relationships is me. Pride is causing issues, self-focus. The person who loves others and is focused on the goal is the person who thinks of themselves the least and has the least issues with others. He's never the cause of problems if there is a problem. These are the daughters of pride to think about. First off, boasting. The fathers call boasting the daughter of pride, meaning the result of pride. The person who boasts won't see the necessity and importance of other members in the body. The person with pride can lead to despising others. The person with pride can have a lot of individuality and feel like they're the only ones who can do the job and can do it properly, and they love to work alone. He can label it and say that I'm worried about the service, or they may not work as well, so it becomes individual. These people who have the strong individuality are very much my way or the highway. When you offer for them to work together, they refuse, and they want to work alone and do it in their own mentality and their own approach. And if people say no, then they feel like they've been kicked out of the church and people have refused them. Selfishness is another daughter of pride. Sarcasm is also a daughter of pride. Sometimes the person who's prideful just becomes sarcastic about anything that's being done and will make fun of it and be like, this is a waste of time. Prideful people will reject fellowship. They don't have time to sit and speak with people or sit and plan. Of course, we have to sit and gather and think and pray together and eat together. But the prideful person feels like they're above this. Stubbornness is another daughter of pride. My word has to go, and if it doesn't, then I'll be upset. Do you remember Ahithophel? He gave an opinion. When Absalom didn't take his opinion, he went and killed himself. That's the epitome of stubbornness. He's not used to someone not taking his advice. He didn't handle it. Obstinacy, grumpiness, a couple more daughters of pride. When someone is very grumpy and upset, it's very easy to identify when you see it. People who are constantly grumpy or upset about something, you'll see that pride is at the root of that. But the humble person, like St. Mary, is always joyful. With all the difficulty that she saw in life, she remained joyful. Revenge is another daughter of pride. Your pride can get to the point that you want to avenge, even in service. Can you imagine? Between two people who love each other like a couple. It shocks me when I see someone who loved someone and now wants to have revenge against her. Does that mean that means like you never understood what love means? Bitter jealousy is also a daughter of pride. All of this comes from pride, from the ego, from honor, from wanting to be honored. So let's be cognizant of it, because this can be very dangerous for us. You can look at this and say, I'm righteous, I don't have any of these things. I guarantee you, if you say that, then you are definitely prideful. If you don't see that you have any of these, then you have a bigger problem, meaning you can't see or understand the issues that you have. I guarantee you that everyone has some of these issues. We always need more humility. What we need to reach is that the hand to protect the eye when necessary. We mutually need each other. Every human relationship has mutual need. The father needs the son, and the son needs the father. The wife needs the husband, and vice versa. The friend needs his friend, and vice versa. The servant needs his priest, and the priest needs his servant. The servant needs his co-servant, and so on. Those who want to go to heaven need to hold on to others to go to heaven together. Heaven doesn't take individuals. The door doesn't open except for teams entering heaven together. But if someone is coming on their own, then this person will be stuck at the door, unfortunately. Because heaven is all about cooperation. All the angels, tens of thousands of them, when they praise in unison in one voice. You see the opposite in deacons, 10 people, 10 different voices, 10 different pitches. But we see angels in the thousands all praying in one voice. We need to reach the point to ensure the safety of the other in the relationship even before yourself, to love your brother and to honor them before you honor yourself. Also important to have maturity of responsibility, meaning realizing that the service at hand is bigger than you. It's bigger than both of you. If you don't cooperate and work together, people may eternally suffer. We need to hold on to each other to reach the point of reaching and helping each other. Think about the 4 friends who carried their paralyzed friend. It says that when Christ saw the faith of the friends, it wasn't about the paralyzed person. It was about the faith of the friends who didn't think about themselves. They only thought about their friend who was ill. So they each played their role in simplicity. They didn't know what teamwork was. They didn't think about membership or any of these things. All they knew was, this is our friend and he's suffering. Let's work together to get him to Christ. If one of them had pulled the rope a little too hard, then their friend would have fallen. But they had to work in unison, in balance, and in conjunction in order to bring him to Christ. From 1 Corinthians says, no, much rather those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary, and those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor. Let's talk about this for a bit. In physiology, we see hair as a symbol of beauty, but hair is not necessary for us to function. When you look at the liver, it's not a pretty organ, but it's extremely crucial. You see the point I'm trying to make? Eyelashes, for example, are a symbol of beauty, but they're not necessary for human functioning. But something internal, like an internal organ, are crucial, but their image is not as attractive. Meaning beauty and functionality and worthiness are very different things. The mother can be old, but she is extremely valuable, and so her beauty is intrinsic to her rather than extrinsic. So sometimes, unfortunately, we follow the image. The eye looks pretty, but the eye can't live without the hands. And the hand isn't pretty, it looks normal. We need the weak members that St. Paul describes. We need the elderly, the children, the mentally ill, the poor, the depressed. These people are the ones who will help us enter into heaven. If you think about it, what helps us enter into heaven is these people. I was hungry and you fed me, ill, in prison, etc. These are the people that Christ described. So without them, we're not going to reach heaven. So we view them as a burden, but in reality, they are a tool for us to reach heaven. God can send angels to deal with the sick and with all the elderly and with all the disabled, but God doesn't do that. He gives us this opportunity to extend our hand and to get the blessing and to stand in front of God and say, I did my part. That's why he's saying that weak members are crucial for us. The church that's wise puts the poor people first, the disabled first, the elderly first, the children first, before anything else. Because those, even if they are a burden, are in reality the way by which the body can do its role. The people who are what we imagine to be the most beautiful or the most important in appearance may not be as necessary. But God composed the body, having given greater honor to the part which lacks it. If you feel like you are lacking, in God's eyes you are more honorable. Maybe in front of people you feel like you're lacking, but in God's eyes you're extremely valuable.
فكرت يوسف النجار
If you think about Joseph the carpenter,
قصته معانا وهو
he
90
started
سنة
his story maybe in his 90s,
يعني راجل عجوز
an elderly man, and at the end of his life.
خد العذراء وهو
But he took St. Mary when he was 90 years old,
هو
went to Egypt
التسعينات
while he was an elderly man, and was responsible for the Holy Family for 16 years, and died when he was 106 years old.
الراجل العجوز ناقص
This was an old man, but think about his honor now.
ربنا اداله كرامة كبيرة
God gave him an incredible amount of honor to be the one to carry the Lord Christ and be responsible for his protection and St. Mary's protection.
حط مبدأ تاني العضو المتألم
The passage again says, and if one member suffers, all the members suffer.
طفل معوق ممكن
A disabled child can be the reason for the reconciliation of his parents. I can think of more than one case when I saw a father who was always far from God, and when he had a disabled child, it brought him back to God. And so if he goes to heaven, it'll be because of the child. And that's what the father said to me. This happens often. Sometimes it can be forgiveness between two friends when a big problem arises. The problem makes you realize it's not time for arguing or fighting, and so we come together and work for the third person.
ساعات صديق ضائع يرجع الأصدقاء ساعات خدمة رحمة بتجمع كل الخدمات في بعض ساعات
Sometimes a service of mercy can bring together all services and meetings, or a difficult accident can restore relationships. God allows suffering to happen in order to bring us together.
هو اللي يلملم الناس
Sometimes the presence of pain is what brings us together to carry the burden together. One time I went to go to a funeral, and I saw her husband get up, weeping bitterly, and hugging someone at the funeral, and they both were weeping. And so I asked him, "Who is this person you're hugging?" He told me, "This is my brother, who I haven't spoken to in 10 years."
جه يعزف مراتي والراجل كان بيبكي بحرقة اللي جاي عمال يقول له حق
And the death of the member of the family is what finally brought them to reconciliation after 10 years.
حكمتك يا رب ممكن تبقى أصحاب من غير يعني وجع جامد
It
كده
would be ideal if we could be friends without these difficult situations, but sometimes they come for this reason.
يبقى يعني
Sometimes we get satanic thoughts that come from us that say,
أنت بتقبل
if this person dies, then I'll be relieved.
فلان إيه رأيك فيه خلينا نريح جو الخدمة يعني مش هيجي دوره بقى ساعات يجي
Sometimes we get another thought that this person hates me, when in reality you're the one who hates him, but you're convinced that this person hates you.
أو تبقى دايما
Another time we can get a thought that says he's the one who's hindering the service, when in reality it's you who are being a hindrance to the service. You're the one who's unable to love or forgive or to be humble. You can't pray.
هو اللي معطل الخدمة هو
He's not the one that's stopping the service, it's you.
طبعا فكرة إنه مش بيفهم
Sometimes we get the thoughts that he doesn't understand, or my speed is different, or you know what, I'm going to leave the house or leave the service. These words have no place in our service. What does it mean I'm going to leave the service or leave the home? This is not a game. This is the path to heaven. We're going to heaven together. We have to hold on to each other.
لأنه أول ما هنسيبني وهسيب
Because as soon as we leave each other, the devil is going to take over and we'll suffer.
أنتوا عارفين كده إن خراب أي
And you know this, that
قرب من كل الأطراف
that when a home breaks up, Satan has come closer to each member of the home.
تحبوا تخلوا الشيطان أمين خدمة أستاذ بقى ما أقولكوش هيعمل إيه في الخدمة ويبقى منظم جدا بس هياخد خدمة في حتة تانية بس ممكن يعمل كده ما أنت فتحت له الباب في الآخر الطريق الأفضل
So the more excellent way in which St. Paul concludes his passage says,
حكاية المواهب
"But carefully desire the best gifts, and yet I show you a more excellent way." You can have songs, you can be good at preaching, you can be good at this or that, but even more important than talents, there is a more excellent way.
more excellent way اللي هي إيه بقى كلكم حافظين عارفين
And we know that the next thing he talks about is that Though I speak with tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a changing cymbal. So the more excellent way in service is love. We need servants who love each other. We don't need talents. They're not important. We don't need miracles. We don't need beautiful voices. We need love first and foremost. And if we love each other, then everything will come naturally. And God is not stingy. He'll give us an abundance. But first and foremost, love. So St. Paul puts all the talents there and says none of them matter except for love. And then he describes love in chapter 13. Love doesn't behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. The person who loves is the one who can serve. If we look at this passage, it says that with love, there can't be envy or pride or arrogance or abhorrence. Don't comment negatively about your co-servants or about somebody else in service. You can give your opinion or give an idea, but there's no reason to push somebody down. Maybe this person is doing their best and God is accepting them and you're not the one accepting them. God is accepting people that we ourselves don't accept, and He's happy with them as they are. But you're the issue because you're not the one accepting them. If we had the apostles with us today, we probably wouldn't accept them because they were simple men from a different culture, and we would feel like they're not as important. It's essential for us to be cautious in order to keep the hand and the eye friends. Make sure that we are gentle, trusting, sacrificing, generous, enduring, and patient. To have oneness of heart and oneness of function is crucial. He wanted to unite everything in Him. Love is not words or emotions. It's enduring, it takes time, it takes effort and sacrifice. I hope that every person says to people close to him that I need you. Not that I'm bearing with you. No, I want you to tell others that I need you. I can't serve without you. This makes a big difference in people's lives. It's not that I can do this or I can do that or I don't need you. No. No. Tell someone that I need you truly. This is the language that St. Paul used when he says the eye needs the hand. It's not about bearing or putting up with someone. No, it's about needing them and believing that you need others. You are different from me, therefore I need you. You challenge me, therefore I need you. You see what I don't see, therefore I need you. The well-being of those I love makes me always need you. So service, just as much as it needs me, it needs you. And with this, you'll see that the family becomes one, the body becomes one, and the oneness of heart is not hard and is not impossible. And when Christ sees this atmosphere, He will say, how lovely it is to get together as ointment gathering on the head of Aaron the priest. When God sees that people truly love one another, not focusing on each other's sins, it's as if we poured oil on the head of Christ, as if we gave Him a valuable gift that brings Him a lot of joy and brings a beautiful fragrance. The beauty of the church is that it's the only institution in the world that its members don't struggle against each other. Unfortunately, we can't say that at this time. But in the mind of Christ, this is what the church looked like. It is the only institution in which its members work together for the sake of the head, who is Christ. And they all struggle and fight for the head and for each other. This is the ideal image of the church, and if we do it, then the whole world will come to the church. But as long as the church has ego and has me, and I need this and I need that, then we have a long way to go. And glory be to God forever. Amen.
بيتكلم برضه لو بيعمل لما بيتكلم هو
عايز نكمل ده؟
بكل طاقتنا نيجي على نفسنا